What is going on, basketball lovers and hoopheads? Welcome back to the Checkup Basketball Podcast, where I am here to take you through the week that was in the NBA. This is the Friday wrap-up show. As always, we've got plenty of things to talk about because the NBA never truly stops. So we got a couple of news items I want to address up top. We'll get to that, and then we're going to get to some takeaways. Tonight, this Thursday night, I'm recording this, will go out on Friday morning. Tonight was the last night of NBA basketball that we will have until the All-Star break. So on Monday, there's going to be a draft, an NBA draft or a college basketball forward podcast. I'm going to bring Shaler back on. We're going to talk about college basketball and draft prospects. Can't wait to do that before next Friday's episode. We'll be getting back into NBA stuff and preparing for the stretch run in the NBA season. But to start us, today's podcast is a couple of news items up top. I've got 3 takeaways for you as always, and then nothing to finish on because, like I said, normally I would finish with what I'm looking forward to coming up or things I am watching over the next couple of days. There's nothing to watch over the next couple of days other than the All-Star Weekend, and I hate the All-Star Weekend. It sucks. It's a bad concept. I can't believe NBA players who get paid millions and millions of dollars to play the game of basketball have no interest in playing it for children's entertainment, but alas, it does me no good to complain about that here, so I don't really care to talk about the All-Star Weekend, and I would normally at the end of these episodes do I decided I want to do a little NBA draft college basketball corner, a little short 5 minutes on college basketball, but since we're doing a whole podcast on Monday about college basketball, we will just save that until then. So 3 takeaways, couple of news items up top. We're going to get you in and out here today, all right? This is going to be a relatively quick one. Let's start with the first bit of news that we have, and that is Jeremy Sochan was waived by the San Antonio Spurs, a former top 10 pick in the 2022 draft. The Spurs outright waived him. They tried to find a trade pairing for him right before the trade deadline, but obviously there wasn't really much of a market for him, at least not one that would provide value to the Spurs in the way that these see fit. I think the Spurs probably value an open roster spot versus possibly having to give up assets to trade off Jeremy Sochan at the trade deadline. So it appears that the Spurs and Sochan's agents just decided that the best thing to do now would be to waive the man and let him go sign with another team so he has hopes of playing some basketball before the end of this year so that he can hopefully earn himself a contract in the offseason as he will be a free agent at the end there. And then, of course, today, Sochan was waived yesterday, I think, on Wednesday. So today, Thursday, we saw that Jeremy Sochan signed with the New York Knicks. This is interesting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. This is going to be a big story because Sochan was a former top 10 pick, and a big team, a good team in the East, picked him up in the New York Knicks. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure what Jeremy Sochan is right now as an NBA player. I think for the Knicks, this is almost certainly not a pickup for this season to play him and have him provide to your team or really contribute to your team for the rest of this year. This is probably a bit more of a development bet, maybe hoping that you can bring him in. Maybe in the offseason, you sign him a cheap 1-year deal, bring him back, see what he's got. Maybe there's something there, maybe there's not, and then you move on with your lives. Jeremy Sochan was really interesting to me coming out of college, and actually as an OKC fan at the time, I thought he would be a pretty interesting pick for us if we landed in the range to take him. We ended up selecting Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams instead. So good call on Sam Presti's part, although he wouldn't really have had the chance to draft Jeremy. But that's besides the point. I was interested in him coming out of Baylor. Jeremy's a 6'8", kind of big forward. He's not really a wing, but he has some ball handling skills. He does have like a connective passing tendency. And then really coming out of college, it was the defense, right? It's that he's this big, switchy four who could spotlight as like a center defender or like defend bigs, but could also like very easily switch out onto the perimeter, 1 through 3 on a point guard's wings, whatever, and just kind of help bring a defense together. And then, just being like a smart, opportunistic passer, possible ball handler on the other side of the ball. And it just, nothing has really come together for him. The offense is just, pretty much an unmitigated disaster. I don't know what he is offensively, because NBA teams are smart, right? And they attack your weaknesses. And Jeremy Sochan has a lot of weaknesses. He's not a particularly strong finisher, especially not at 6'8". He's an awful, awful shooter. He can't create for himself. He doesn't have separation. Like, he's 6'8". He's pretty tall, 6'8", 230. He's big, but he's not some huge muscly four who can work somebody down in the post or like get easy opportunities. He's not a great like screener, pick and roll guy. There's just, as far as a scoring threat, it's non-existent. And so on offense, he's really easy to scheme out. You saw that when he was playing with the Spurs, especially this year, with guys like Steph Castle and De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. Whenever he was put on the floor with those guys, which, those are like the Spurs ball handlers and the Spurs best players, like teams could easily just throw doubles at those guys and not have to worry about Sochan like finding opportunities on the floor to score. They don't care if he shoots. They don't care if he catches the ball in the dunker spot. They don't care if he's open like 18 feet from the rim. He's not really going to do anything with it. He doesn't have great touch. He's just kind of an offensive nothing right now. The passing is something that I think is interesting. He's a bit like the Spurs a couple years back tried the Jeremy Sochan at point guard experiment with Victor Wembanyama. That went terribly. He's just not a lead ball handler, lead decision maker like that. And that's okay. I think there is something to the passing, but he's too easy to scheme out against on the offensive side of the ball, and just being a zero on either end of the ball in today's NBA, it just kind of makes it impossible to play you. I think there is something to the defense, but it's not so good that you're like, I got to find minutes for this guy. I think what he does is replicable, and he does an admirable job on the defensive end, but it's not, again, so exceptional that you just have to find minutes for him. So I think for the Knicks, like I said, this is not really a pickup for this year to plot him into this team and to find him minutes and for him to be a big contributor. This is a bit of like a development bet. He's basically just taking the Gershon Yabusele spot, which is completely fine. They're honestly like not super dissimilar body types and theoretical fits on the floor. They're a bit of different. They're quite a bit different as players, but the Yabusele thing didn't work. They traded off of him at the trade deadline. Now they bring in Jeremy Sochan with an open roster spot, and they have another kind of 4/small ball 5 that's theoretically a switchy defender, good passer, still super young. He's only 22 years old, who will have an opportunity to play a little bit and theoretically develop around. I think there are lineups maybe where you could see Jeremy Sochan being paired out there with Karl Anthony Towns, especially considering Towns' defensive inefficiencies. I can't say that. You could see lineups where he plays with Towns, but that's pretty much the only guy you could put him out on the floor with. I don't think any of the other Knicks bigs, Mitchell Robinson, Mohamed Diawara, Ariel Hook-Porty, those aren't guys you can play Sochan with and expect to have like any semblance of a decent offense. So maybe there are some times where they can pair him out there for 5 to 8 to 10 minutes a game with Karl Anthony Towns and see what happens. I'm going to move on from this. Shout out to Jeremy Sochan. I wish nothing but the best for you. Good luck in all of your future endeavors. Let's move on to something else interesting that happened tonight, and that was the Indiana Pacers and the Utah Jazz were fined essentially for tanking. So the Utah Jazz, which this has been a story, especially amongst on ESPN, it's been really big, and just amongst a lot of NBA people in general. The Utah Jazz, after the trade deadline where they received, Jaren Jackson Jr., and it looked like they got these kind of like, they upgraded the roster at the deadline, right? And, we've been expecting Utah to tank all season, and they really already have been. But they traded for Jaren Jackson Jr., and then immediately after the trade deadline, there were 2 games, one against the Heat and one against, I'm blanking on who it was, maybe the Magic, where Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen and Yusuf Nurkic, all their starters play up until right near the end of the third quarter, and then the Jazz pull them from the game, and then they close the game without their best players, right, in the hopes to lose the games. And the NBA fined the Jazz for that. They also fined the Pacers for basically the player participation policy. The players played the Brooklyn Nets recently and sat pretty much their entire roster. It felt like all of their starters, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, literally everyone, Zubats, nobody played in that game. So the NBA fined both of them. So, I think a lot of people, especially after the trade deadline, have been... And excuse me, good Lord. I talked earlier this week about tanking and the conversation that we're having around tanking, and now it appears as though the league is trying to address it in its own small way. They're not going to do anything big mid-season. They can't really, but this has just ignited a firestorm online. It seemingly everybody is upset about tanking, and it's no fun because if a third of the league, 8 to 10 teams theoretically don't want to win games in the back half of the season, well, that makes it so there's a bunch of games on every single night that no one wants to watch because they're boring and they're bad, and the teams aren't even trying to win in them. So a lot of people are upset about tanking right now, and I totally understand that. And I talked a little bit about what my solutions to tanking were on Monday's episode. I've kind of fleshed them out a little bit more, and I kind of want to talk about what people have been commenting along with. There's a lot of ideas coming along with tanking, so I'm going to hit on this tanking thing one more time and then move on. I promise. I just want to run through because I think I fleshed out my thoughts a little bit more than I did on Monday, and I want to go through this. So, first things first, up top, there is a 50-50 way to view this. If you want to be done with tanking altogether, if you don't want teams to try to lose games in order to better their draft position, you have to basically get rid of the draft, right? That's what you have to do. You have to disconnect draft position from your position in the regular season standings. You have to disconnect that. So whether that's getting rid of the draft altogether and going just like young players enter what is basically free agency automatically, or you do something like a fixed draft where there's a rotation and, you go through all 30 spots in the draft and you get, every year your draft position is predetermined and you get what you get as far as picks, right? You could do a system like that, but that's the only way to get rid of tanking altogether. Otherwise, teams are always going to try to game the system. They're going to try to find advantages to better themselves. And why are they always going to try and find advantages? Well, it's because basketball is unique in the sense that top-end talent, one singular player, is more important in basketball than maybe any other sport. In football, it's good to have a good quarterback, right? It's very integral to have a good quarterback. But guess what else you need? You need a good offensive line. You need good wide receivers. You might need a good running back. Maybe you need a good fullback. Maybe you need to get a better tight end, right? And then that's not even talking about defense, where you want a good defensive line. You want some decent cornerbacks. You want a good safety. You want a couple of good edge rushers, right? You need so many good moving parts to make a really great football team. You can't just have one. But in basketball, you can draft one singular player. LeBron James in Cleveland, you can draft one singular player, and it changed so much about what your team is able to accomplish. So teams have a lot of incentive to chase top-end talent. And the problem is the avenues to get top-end talent for different markets or for every team is almost different, right? There is a major disconnect in the NBA between what big markets, large markets, LA, New York, Chicago, Houston, Dallas. Theoretically, what those teams can do, right? They have more appeal purely based on where those teams are located, because we have salary caps in the NBA and every team can spend the same amount of money. So when large markets have different avenues by which they can attract top-end talent, it makes smaller markets in particular seek, use things to their advantage to gain talent. For example, like Oklahoma City for years has been adamant that, a couple years back when the NBA voted to flatten the draft lottery odds, well, OKC was the only team that voted against that, because Sam Presti and the people that run the Oklahoma City Thunder, and now you're seeing other teams follow suit, they understand that the best way for Oklahoma City, which is in a very small market, bottom 5 in the NBA, the only way for them to acquire top-end talent is not through free agency. It's through the draft. And they could do it through trade, but if we talk about the problem with trading for talent, it depletes the rest of your assets. And in this current CBA, this current NBA that we're in, not having a surplus of assets is almost death in a sense, unless you get extremely, extremely lucky. So what's the best way to preserve your asset pool and acquire talent? It's through the draft. So teams are always going to find a way to game the draft while there are unbalanced incentives for larger markets. It's just going to be the way things are, right? The other problem is that the NBA has a middle class, which is just a whole lot of nothing. Think about the Indiana Pacers of the last 10 years. Think about the Chicago Bulls of the last 5 years. Think about the Miami Heat of the last 5 years. Think about the Atlanta Hawks of the last 5 years. Think about Memphis of the last couple of years. Think about Golden State of the last. What do these teams have in common, right? They all go to the play-in, and then they either make the playoffs or they don't. They're facing the 1 or the 2 seed every year. If they don't make the playoffs, they're 14th in lottery odds. They're picking 14th, 13th, 12th in the draft, or they're going into the playoffs against the 1 seed, getting bounced in the first round, getting swept, right? And they have this cycle over and over again where year over year, they attempt to be good. They attempt to be good teams. They're not quite good enough, but they're not bad enough to get good draft picks. And they're not good enough to win any playoff series. So they're just stuck in this middle. And the middle is the worst place to be, because where do you go from there? Upgrading out of the middle is so hard, because unless you all of a sudden unlock the ability to sign a big free agent, or you deplete your assets in trading for somebody, there's just limited ways to acquire talent when you're in the middle. And the ways that you do have to acquire talent, they are harmful to you in other ways, right? It's a double-edged sword in many ways. So there's a middle class where I think not a lot of teams want to be. There are a couple of teams that are content with being in the middle class, but the problem is that there are teams that are realistic. They understand that they're contending. They're going for it, right? You can think about the Houston Rockets, the San Antonio Spurs, the Thunder, the Pistons, the Celtics, right? These teams, they're the best in their conferences. They're going for it. They think they can win a championship. But teams like the Wizards, for example, they understand that they're not good enough to be that. But if they try every single night and they play their full lineups and they're trying their asses off to win every single game, what is it going to even result in? It's going to result in a whole lot of nothing for the most part. It might result in 38 wins, 40 wins, 41 wins. But who cares? You're just going to get bounced in the first round of the playoffs, where you're going to lose in the play-in. So who cares to try that hard? I'd rather just try to lose a bunch of games and try to get talent at the top of the draft. So the NBA needs to incentivize, or rather they need to provide smaller markets the capability to compete with bigger markets in other ways than just the draft. What they also need to do is incentivize teams to try. So my two solutions to that, and I understand that we got here kind of maybe incoherently, and I apologize, but I hope this makes sense. The two ways I think you can best accomplish that are by giving teams that are in the play-in better lottery odds. That's basically what you have to do, right? If you're not a bona fide playoff team, you're a team that's like the 7th seed, 8th seed, but you tried all season to win games, you should be rewarded. So maybe instead of when you lose in the play-in or whatever, right, you get the 10th odds or something. Or you get the 9th odds or the 8th odds. And with these flattened lottery odds, like, that's not bad. That's not a bad consolation prize to be like, hey, you tried all season, you lost in the play-in, here's the 8th pick, or here's, you could get a top 3 pick. Who knows? So you need to, I think, incentivize teams to try to get to the play-in. So you need to get teams to try. And then secondly, you can reward small markets the ability to keep their talent. If you were drafted by a team, then signing that player to an extension, especially like a max extension. We could just go max extension, right? Coming off of a max extension for a rookie right now is 25% of the salary cap. And there's different bonuses that you can give up there to where it could be up to 30% of the salary cap, right? If the player signs the extension and in the first year of that extension, they make All-NBA, right? That's a big stipulation. They make All-NBA in the first year of that extension, then they go up to 30%. Well, we should give those teams, we should say, hey, that 30% salary, your player still makes 30% of the cap, but it only counts as 25%. Or if you give that person a 25% max salary, it only counts as 20% against your cap. That way, the team saves a little bit of money on their salary cap and gives them the ability to acquire or retain other talent to keep around their stars so that they can stay competitive. Look at the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies tore everything down, pretty much. They tore everything down in 1 year. 3 years ago, right? They're like the 2 seed. And they're taking on the Warriors in the second round of the playoffs, the team that won the championship. And that team just a few years later is completely torn apart, limb from limb, because financially their flexibility was destroyed. It's gone. But imagine if the guys they signed to these max extensions, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., even Desmond Bane, what if they counted as just a little bit less? That way, when Memphis is looking at their team in the offseason, they're like, all right, maybe we'll retain Kyle Anderson this time. Maybe we won't just let all these good role players walk, because we can retain them, because we can still pay our guys and reward them for being here and reward them for being good and being all-stars and being blah, 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 whatever. But we can also retain role players. That way, Memphis doesn't feel the need to tank this year and trade away all their good players. I think that's a decent solution to this all. Again, like, OKC is going to have to give away good players. This offseason, they're going to lose, theoretically, Lou Dort, Isaiah Hartenstein, Alex Caruso, or maybe Cason Wallace doesn't get an extension. Like, one of those guys is just not going to be on the team for very long, or Cason Wallace is not going to get paid, like, all because they did such a damn good job of building their team that now it's going to be torn apart by financial restrictions. I think they should be able to just maintain that talent. That way they can compete for a really long time. And that's not like a homer thing, I promise. That's just me like trying to be realistic about this. The same thing's going to happen to the Spurs. They're not going to be able to give De'Aaron Fox, Steph Castle, Dylan Harper, and Victor Wembanyama all max extensions. They can't do it. Or if they give, 3 of those guys max extensions, one of those guys a big contract, well, bye-bye Carter Bryant, bye-bye Devin Vassell, bye-bye whoever else, right? Because you can't afford it. They shouldn't be punished for that. But I think that kind of wraps up my tanking thoughts. Again, just to recoup what I said, because it might have been a little rambly, a little more incoherent than I wanted it to be. But basically, there's only 2 things. There's one thing you can do if you want to get rid of the draft, right? And that's just, you have to disconnect draft position from the position in the standings. That's the only way to do it. So you either have to get rid of the draft altogether, or you have to have a fixed draft every single year. If you have a fixed draft, then you just have to accept that there's some years where, like, the Wizards are going to get the 30th pick despite only winning 18 games or something. And the Wizards aren't going to be happy about that. And then, like, the Spurs are going to get the 1 pick again or something. That's going to happen if you want to do that. I don't think you can do that. I don't think the NBA would do that. You need to eliminate the middle class by stop making it, like, stop punishing teams for making it to the play-in and stuff, right? Like, if teams make it to the play-in and they miss, then they get a better draft pick. You know, they should get a better draft pick than a team that's like Utah or whatever, that's just 9th every year and is not very good. Like, these teams that just don't compete for the play-in but don't tank super hard or aren't that bad. Like, these teams that just win 25 games. Like, no. Like, if you try to win games and you get all the way to the play-in or whatever and you lose in the play-in, then, hey, here's the 8th pick instead of the 14th pick. I think you should do that. And then, yeah, there should be we should be incentivizing teams to draft and retain homegrown talent. And we should be rewarding teams for having homegrown talent rather than punishing them with these huge contract extensions. That's the wrap up of that. Hopefully that didn't go on too long. I want to move on to my takeaways. We got some actual basketball stuff to talk about. That's probably all the commentary I will give on the tanking situation for quite some time. But I want to move on, talk about some actual basketball real quick. We'll wrap this up and we'll get you out of here. And I will see you back again on Monday. All right, let's move along. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the Charlotte Hornets. More specifically, I brought up Moussa Diabate. I brought up the little winning streak that they were going on. I think at that time they were like 6-1 in their last 7 games, something like that. Since then, the Hornets got up to a 9-game win streak, I think. Then they had the big brawl out with the Pistons. That was awesome. Tons of fun. Love a good fight. We had suspensions. Hornets lost a couple of their guys for a couple games, but they've continued their winning ways. And I want to talk about a specific player on that team. It's not LaMelo Ball. It's not Con Knipple. It's kind of the forgotten guy that I don't think a ton of people talk about, and that's Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller is a third-year forward. He came out of Alabama, I think it was. He was the 2nd overall pick in the 2023 draft. He had, I think, a pretty good rookie season. I like that he came in immediately just as like a 3-point gunner, was putting him up. That's what he was in college. He, had some mild inefficiencies in his rookie year, blah, 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 whatever. Second season, he comes in. He's taking even more threes. He's looking kind of wild. Hurts his shoulder, and I think breaks his wrist, if I remember, or like tore a ligament in his wrist, something, and missed a large portion of last year. Only played like 20-something games. And then this year has come back, and he's been interesting. Really interesting for the Hornets. On the season, he's averaging 21 points per game, shooting 43% from the field and 36% from 3, although shooting 8 3-point attempts per game and shooting about 90% from the line. We're also looking at, for rounded up to 5 rebounds, about 3.5 assists, and almost 3 turnovers a game. So if you look at the raw stats, especially on the season as a whole, they're okay. But since January, especially when the Hornets have picked things up, he's looked a lot better. I think when I was looking at those stats earlier, we're talking about up to 23 points per game, shooting almost 50% from the field rather than 43% from the field, shooting like 44% from 3, something just absolutely absurd. He has been on fire since the start of the new year. And I'm just starting to wonder what his ceiling is and what he really is as a basketball player. You see, I like Brandon Miller, and he's been an awesome scorer. He's doing a lot of things this year, I think, that have been super encouraging to me. The problem with him coming out of college was that he's like just not a ball handler at all, really, right? And when he's not a guy who can get downhill with ease. Really, really bad rim finisher in college, and that was like a big concern for a lot of people. He's continued that for the most part in his NBA career. He's getting a little bit better this year, though, and you see a lot more of him like handling the ball in pick and rolls, being trusted to get downhill and make a play. I really like his mid-range game right now. Obviously, he's an incredible three-point shooter. I still think there's a lot of struggles with him at the rim. He's not super flexible, and he doesn't absorb contact super well. He's 6'7", so he's pretty sizable, but he's only 200 pounds. He's pretty thin and wiry. Like I said, doesn't absorb contact super well. I don't think he's super flexible either, and he just struggles to finish at the rim right now, and that's okay. But like I said, mid-range game looks pretty solid. The threes, they're incredible. He is just a flamethrower of a shooter, and he will just get going in all sorts of ways, hitting all sorts of things off of, movement, standstills, catch and shoot, pull up. He's sitting like 6 feet behind the arc, just ripping these threes. And he isn't, he's just like a dead eye shooter. And I'm kind of like, I'm keeping my eye on what he is as a player in the NBA. I think right now, the ceiling is a little bit limited, but he's like near all-star caliber, right? Like, how many non-all-star caliber players average 23 points per game, shoot 40% from three on almost 9 attempts a game, right? Like, how many players do that? Not a ton. And I like what I've seen as far as the passing. I still think the turnovers are a bit of a problem, right? He almost has a dead even assist-to-turnover ratio, and it's because the handle is still pretty loose. The passing decisions can be really questionable sometimes. Like, he'll just throw it into like 2 guys or whatever and get picked off, or he'll have like bad pass turnovers out of bound, whatever. But he's super, super interesting. And to me, like, I just think a big part of them winning all these games has been Brandon Miller, like, really stepping into his own. He's also doing a lot of, like, hustle things, right? Or just, like, smart things on the floor. He's not just on fire from three. You'll see a lot of times, like, he had a play that I think it was against the Pistons really early in that Pistons game where he picked off a pass in the corner, so he got a steal. He throws a hit ahead to LaMelo Ball, who's, like, basically already at the half-court line. LaMelo Ball, like, it starts taking it over. It's a fast break, right? And Brandon Miller just busts his ass down the court. He is flying down the court and, is able to, he gets a lob on that play, like a sick lob from LaMelo, just because he busted his ass the entire way down the court. It was incredible. And, like, stuff like that is, like, really encouraging to see from him. And it's not something I thought I'd really ever see from a Charlotte Hornets player in my lifetime. So Brandon's starting to do things that I think contribute a ton to winning basketball. And I really wonder, this Hornets team is exciting to me. Brandon Miller coming into his own. I think LaMelo's taken a reduced role, and it's done wonders for him. Khan has obviously been a revelation as a rookie, is probably, possibly looking at being their best player and a superstar into the future. Moussa Diabate is like a fun, energetic big. I hope Miles Bridges gets banished from this team forever soon because I'm sick of seeing him with all these good vibes. But the Hornets have something really interesting here, and Brandon Miller is probably the second most important player in that, just because, like at this point in LaMelo's career, we know what he is. He's a inefficient, up and down, on-ball scorer, but he's a very talented passer and can be a very creative shot maker when he is not the only one on the court doing it at any given time, right? And Con Knipple is one of the best screening, shooting, just smart, useful NBA players we've seen in some time. So Brandon Miller has the opportunity to step into this almost like, not role, but I feel like he could be Paul George, where he's just this lanky, rangy defensive wing who is an incredible shooter, who can get into the mid-range and score and shoot over anybody, is maybe limited as a passer and like primary pick and roll ball handler, but I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to ponder what he is and what he could be and what the ultimate version of this Charlotte Hornets team looks like. I think they have a pretty high ceiling if they can continue on the path that they're on. So something I'm keeping my eye on. Shout out to Brandon Miller. I hope he stays healthy. Hope he stays out of trouble, Jesus. And I just hope to continue to see improvement from him. Because I think this guy at this rate is a future all-star, and I truly do wonder what the Hornets' ceiling is with him. If you're watching the podcast, I have that play I was talking about where he picked off the pass on the baseline. Look at the way he just runs the court. Awesome stuff. Winning basketball plays. You love to see it. Shout out to Brandon Miller. Shout out to the Charlotte Hornets. Can't wait to see what we can do in the play-in, baby. Are you excited? I'm excited. But, yeah, let's wrap up on Brandon Miller. Let's move on to my next takeaway, which is going to be coming at you sideways. It's a left hook, and you're not prepared for it. All right, now we are moving on to my second takeaway from this past week of basketball, and that is going to be, is he the newest? No, he's technically not the newest member of the Milwaukee Bucks, but he's a very new member of the Milwaukee Bucks, and that is Ousmane Dieng. Now, Ousmane Dieng, of course, legendary former Thunder lottery pick, Ousmane Dieng is now playing with the Milwaukee Bucks, and he's had a couple of really nice games. I will say, in OKC, he just never really had the opportunity to really flesh out his game, in all honesty. And that's, he came in at 18 years old. He was the 11th pick in the 2022 draft. He came into a team that was full of a ton of prospects, and he was a guy who's super, super raw coming out of the NBL. And he was a guy that, like, Sam Presti literally had followed in France for years before he played in Australia, and was obviously just a guy that Sam Presti was infatuated with. Coming into the draft, he's like a 6'10" forward who theoretically has ball handling, passing, and shot making skills. So he was basically just this super raw talent bet. It's like, hey, this guy could be out of the NBA in 2 years, or like maybe this is a superstar in hiding. Superstar? No, he's not really that. And again, just in OKC, he kind of got buried in the rotation early. Has honestly been in and out with some injuries over the years, and as OKC kind of just accelerated into to the level that they're at now, he just never found his way onto the court consistently. Couldn't really provide anything, I think, that OKC didn't really already have or didn't really need. And now he got traded to the Milwaukee Bucks, where he is going to get a chance to play. And the early returns, I think, have been really solid. He's only played 3 games with the Bucks, but his last 2 games, pretty impressive. He played on Wednesday night against the Bucks. He had 17 points on 6 of 10 shooting, 60% from the field, really solid efficiency. He was 5 of 8 from 3, contributed like 3 rebounds, but the 5 of 8 from 3 was a really big, eye-opening thing for me. And Ousmane, I genuinely think he's a good shooter. And like the limited minutes he's had this season, he shot like 37% from 3 for OKC, which is like not bad. That's not bad at all. And I think he is a good shooter. When you watch him, he's got like a really silky smooth jump shot. It comes out of his hands, quick and easy. He'll take step back threes, and you'll kind of be like, whoa, and then it'll go in. And you're like, oh, okay, I like what I'm seeing. And it's quick trigger too. And he's like genuinely like 6'10". Like he's huge. So, and a plus size wingspan, like his shot's pretty well unguardable when he catches on the perimeter. Or unblockable, I guess I should say, not unguardable. But, like, he's a damn good shooter. Shot 5 of 8 from 3 in that game against Orlando and was a huge part of why they upset Orlando and beat them in that game. And then tonight against OKC, revenge game in Oklahoma City, Ousmane Dieng has 19 points on 7 of 12 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, but threw in 11 rebounds and 6 assists. Damn good game. And when I was watching him, I just kind of couldn't believe it was the same guy. And there was this, like, he's always had this aloofness to his game. And that was kind of the problem with him in OKC, where he just wasn't assertive at all. And he just he'd float around the court, and he's silky and smooth. But anytime he comes into contact, he, like, shies away from it. And he just was not assertive in any way. But, like, tonight against OKC, he was moving, gliding around the court, getting to his spots when he needed to. He played excellently as a ball handler. I always thought he flashed some like really interesting connective touch passing stuff, or as a lead ball handler. They actually would have OKC used him a lot as a lead ball handler in the G League. So when he'd go play with the G League team, he was basically their point guard. And I think you can kind of see some of that where Milwaukee is, it's like, hey, somebody come in and do something, please. Ryan Rollins, and Giannis aren't playing this game. We need somebody to handle the ball and do something. And he was doing stuff tonight, man. He had this really awesome, pick and roll play with Jericho Sims out on the wing where he kind of just, he gets around his defender. I think it might have been Lou Dort or somebody. He gets him on his hip, keeps him there, dribbles in with his left hand, sees Jericho Sims, or sees, the OKC defender step up to him and pick and roll and try to contain him. And just because he's 6'10", he's tall, he's huge, he just kind of stands up over them and throws this beautiful lob pass. Maybe not beautiful lob pass, but a lob pass nonetheless to Jericho Sims, and he gets a nice dunk out of it. That was awesome to see. I couldn't believe what my eyes were watching. And he got into the mid range and he hit a shot and he was hitting some crazy threes. He did a crazy one falling out of bounds. So he's just doing some things where you're like, wow, I kind of can't believe Ousmane Dieng is penetrating into the paint and rising up over guys for mid range shots, and he's making little dump passes to his guys down in the paint, and he's swinging the ball on the perimeter a really smart way. And I think he has a real chance in Milwaukee, especially in the second half of the season. Milwaukee's doesn't really seem like they're signaling they want to lose a ton of games. Giannis is going to come back, and I'll be super interested. Ousmane is certainly not a big. He's not a 4-5. He's definitely a wing. He's going to play on the wing. So, can Milwaukee throw him in lineups where he's the 3 next to Giannis at the 4? And can Giannis get him some open threes and he can knock him down, or maybe make some plays off of closeouts and whatnot? And he's a much better passer than someone like KPJ. Can he just be this interesting connective wing? I think he's gonna have a chance, and I'm really interested to watch down the end of this season how things go for him. Again, Milwaukee's not going to be trying to lose a ton of games. It doesn't really feel like. And if he can get out there, he can continue to shoot well. And, he doesn't have a ton of turnovers or a bunch of dumb mistakes right on the floor. He can get out there for Milwaukee. They need bodies right now. And especially people on the wing. Good Lord, their wing rotation is horrific. So shout out to Ousmane Dieng. I'm glad you are doing something in your new home. I wish him nothing but the best. I think there's something in there. He especially because he can be a nice switchy defender for them and a big deflections guy. Milwaukee can use anybody with a pulse who can kind of defend right now. And although he will get out physicaled and moved around by big muscly dudes because he's just really, really skinny, really, really thin, and just hasn't figured out how to absorb contact at all. He's got these long ass arms and good instincts, I think, in passing lanes. So he could be a guy who, when he's getting 25-30 minutes a night, he's generating a lot of steals and deflections for you, and being a nice, he can switch out onto a point guard and defend jump shot well. You'll like stuff like that. So shout out to Ousmane Dieng. I think he's going to have a chance in Milwaukee. Can't wait to see what it looks like going down the end of the season. I hope it goes well for him. Let's move on to our last takeaway, where we don't have to talk about it a bunch, but man, the Los Angeles Clippers, they really just don't fucking stop, do they? They just keep going no matter what. And I thought that team was dead in the water this year. I certainly thought they're dead in the water as soon as they trade James Harden and Ivica Zubac at the deadline. I was like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is the rest of this roster around them? But no, they come out of the trade deadline and they beat Minnesota and Houston and lose a really close game to Houston. They're still just going to be really solid, aren't they? And they might not be a team that makes it to the playoffs. They're definitely not going to make it into the playoffs as the 6th seed. They're going to be in the play-in for sure, and I don't think they're going to win a play-in game because the offense is really one-dimensional, especially now that Harden is gone. It's really only Kawhi is carrying them on that end of the floor. But the defense will still be solid. Tyronn Lue is a very smart head coach. And I just shout out to the Clippers, man. They continue to try. I really wish they wouldn't because I want them to give OKC a good draft pick. That would be really, really cool of them if they just like tanked and lost every game the rest of the way. But alas, they're probably not going to do that. And man, Kawhi just continues this wildly impressive season. His best individual season as a pro. Like for sure. The defense is not peak Kawhi, and maybe you could argue that like peak two-way Kawhi, that 2019 Kawhi, maybe 2020, whatever. If you want to argue that that's like absolute peak just because of the two-way dominance, that's totally fine. But this is definitely his best offensive season. Like everything he does just goes in the basket. Every time he rises up for that flat-ass mid-ranger, it goes in the basket. He's taken a ton of threes, way more volume than he's ever really taken before. I need to look that up real quick while I'm talking about it. But he's just been incredible. And since the start of January, I think he has an argument, and a really solid one, and probably the correct one, as the second best player in the Western Conference. I'm not going to put him over SGA because he's not been better than SGA. And I could put him over Jokic just because Jokic hasn't really played in the new year all that much, and that's totally fine. But, like, who's the other guy in the West who has an argument over Kawhi Leonard as the best? Anthony Edwards, maybe, but, like, Kawhi's having a better... Maybe not a better all-together season, but he's having a better stretch right now than Anthony Edwards is. Let's look at that. Yeah, he's taking 7 threes a game. Sorry, I wanted to jump back to that. Yeah, easily the most threes he's ever taken in a game before. He's really just kind of unfathomable the way he's carrying this offense still, especially even now with Kawhi or with Harden gone. And it's not like the offense is awesome, but the offense is only him. And the fact that they're still winning games and, like, beating good teams is wildly impressive. The rest of the roster, too, like, I can't believe the way they just scrounged together minutes from off this scrap heap of, like, these weird old vets and weird second chance guys and weird young guys you've never heard of. Keeping my eyes on Yannick Conan Niederhauser, A, having the best name in the NBA, and B, as like an interesting energy backup big. He's slightly undersized, but he jumps and runs and moves around and maybe shoots. I'm not sure, but keeping my eyes on him. He's interesting. Brook Lopez coming back to life. Cannot believe it. Thought that was a dead tree just like standing in the water, man. I thought it was Ovi for old Brookie, but hey, he's getting the three-pointer to come back down. He's bringing back that good rim defense. I can't believe there's still a little juice left in his legs. I was thinking about this as I was kind of writing up my podcast notes here, but Chris Dunn is such an interesting, like, second chance NBA guy. If you remember Chris Dunn coming out of the draft, he was, like, highly touted out of Providence. He was, like, this two-way demon in college, 6'5" point guard. He was the Big East Player of the Year, Big East Defensive Player of the Year, too. For that Providence team, he just, like, dragged to the tournament. He was, I think, a top 5 pick, if I remember correctly, and just came to the NBA, and, like, the offense was an absolute nothing. The shooting was a travesty. Couldn't pass, couldn't really do anything. And now he's turned himself into this, like, menacing defensive wing who can, has nights on offense where it comes and goes, but he's shooting 38% from 3 this year. I'll give it, albeit on relatively limited attempts, but I just can't believe he's stuck around this long. I truly thought it was over for him. He only played 4 games in 2021 for the Atlanta Hawks, bounced around to Portland, spent a couple years in Utah, and now is kind of finding his spot with LA. It's really interesting to me that what his career path has been on. So shout out to Chris Dunn for making it work. I love when guys just like change their game. And he didn't change his game altogether necessarily, but just like accept the role, right? He's like, okay, I'm a defensive monster and I'm just going to hound people on the defensive end. I'm going to make my name, plant my flag there. I'm going to make my money there. And, yeah, all those years of me being like a high-level, high-volume point guard, those are over. And that stuff is just so interesting to me. So shout out to Chris Dunn. John Collins has developed into a really interesting, or rather, like, changed into an interesting player. And LAC gone, I feel like, are the, like, high-level dunks in the pick-and-roll threat, but, like, he's an awesome corner three shooter, at least has been since they've been winning games, in the back end of December. He's still kind of a switchy big. He's a really solid rebounder. You have to play him next to a 5, but he's been damn good for them. I think Mathurin is an interesting piece on this team as a buy low guy, especially for like offensive creation when Kawhi is off the floor and off the bench. He can still get to the free throw line like an absolute menace. I think Tyronn Lue can probably do something with him, and I think that'll be interesting. So I'm excited to watch him there. This team's going to make the play-in. They're going to stay in the play-in. They're going to be really pesky and annoying, and I thought it was over. I thought they were done, especially after the trade deadline. I thought it was just where they go from here. Everything's kind of over, and it's like, oh, they're still just going to be the team that like tries their ass off every night. Kawhi's going to put up an MVP-like season, and by the way, he might be top 5 on the ballot. He's still eligible as of right now if he plays out most of the rest of this year. And they're a team that's just like, we want to beat your ass. We want to play you hard. We're veteran-laden. We're super weird. We're super interesting. And just, I don't know. I love that. This is the kind of team that if they had their draft pick, shout out to my tanking conversation earlier, this is the kind of team that if they still had their draft picks, should be rewarded if they miss the play-in this year. Instead, they're going to be punished by relinquishing it to the Oklahoma City Thunder. But that's besides the point. Sorry, I had a slight interruption there. But, yeah, shout out to the Clippers is all I have to say. I think I've said that 15 times already. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up here. I went harder in on the tanking stuff than I thought I was going to, but I'm very impassioned about it because I think most of the rest of the NBA fans and sports media people are really dumb about this tanking shit. And if you are someone that advocates for eliminating the draft altogether or for giving the champion the number 1 pick, or it's if you're the worst team in the NBA, then you lose your draft pick, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. You're dumb, and I don't care to hear your opinions. That shit's all really stupid. It would never work. It would ruin the NBA as you know it. But alas, I said I was done, and I've made my peace with it. So I'm not going to bring it up again until we get close to the NBA season, the end of the season, and I run out of things to talk about. But on that note, I'm going to finish things here. Thank you so much for listening if you got to this point in the video. Make sure you follow along on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. I have a visual component to this. If you didn't know and you want to check that out, please do. I have many weekly uploads to my YouTube page. Check those out. Fun stuff. As always, here's a little hint. We coming out with a Carter Bryant video here soon. Hopefully tomorrow or within the next 2 days. We shall see how that goes. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. I hope to catch you all in the next one. Okay, and goodbye.